Today, we are diving into one of the most intense and controversial developments unfolding in the Eastern Mediterranean as the Global Sumud Flotilla makes its way toward the Gaza Strip. This flotilla has drawn international attention, raised diplomatic alarms, and has the potential to ignite serious confrontations at sea and on land. The stakes are high, and every step forward brings new risks, new warnings, and new political messages that go far beyond the immediate issue of humanitarian aid. This is not just a story about boats heading toward Gaza. It is about global solidarity, international law, and the dangerous collision between activism and military power. The Global Sumud Flotilla is a coalition effort by international activists, organizations, and human rights advocates who believe that Gaza's blockade must be challenged directly. The word Sumud, meaning steadfastness in Arabic, reflects the symbolism behind this mission. For supporters, it is not only about bringing supplies or making headlines, but also about showing that people around the world will not accept Gaza's isolation in silence. The flotilla is meant to be a moving statement, a protest on the water, and an appeal to conscience aimed at governments and global institutions. It is as much about sending a message to the world as it is about reaching Gaza itself. For years, the Gaza Strip has been under a strict blockade imposed by Israel and, to a degree, Egypt. This blockade controls the movement of people, goods, and resources in and out of Gaza, justified by Israel as a security measure to prevent weapons from reaching Hamas and other armed groups. Critics argue that the blockade has turned Gaza into what some call an open-air prison, severely limiting food, medicine, construction materials, and basic necessities for its population of more than 2 million people. The Global Sumud Flotilla emerges against this backdrop, positioning itself as an act of civil resistance, a defiance of maritime restrictions that many see as a violation of international humanitarian principles. The journey itself is perilous. The Eastern Mediterranean is heavily patrolled by the Israeli Navy, which has previously intercepted similar attempts. Those who remember the 2010 Freedom Flotilla will recall the deadly clash aboard the Mavi Marmara, where Israeli commandos boarded the ship and 9 activists were killed in the ensuing confrontation. That incident sparked global outrage and still lingers as a warning of what can happen when activism collides with military enforcement at sea. The shadow of that event looms large over the current flotilla, and both supporters and critics know that history could repeat itself in dangerous ways. Israel has made clear that it views these flotillas not as humanitarian efforts, but as political provocations. Officials argue that humanitarian supplies can and should enter Gaza through coordinated channels, not through direct maritime approaches that bypass Israeli security checks. For Israel, allowing the flotilla to reach Gaza freely would set a precedent that undermines the blockade, which it sees as a crucial barrier against arms smuggling. This is why the Israeli Navy is almost certain to confront the flotilla before it nears the Gaza coast. The question is not whether a confrontation will happen, but rather how intense and violent it might become, and how each side will react in front of a global audience. On the other hand, flotilla organizers insist that official channels are inadequate, slow, and subject to political manipulation. They claim that aid convoys are often blocked, delayed, or stripped of essential items, leaving civilians in Gaza with little relief. By sailing directly to Gaza, they argue, the flotilla not only brings material assistance, but also asserts the right of Palestinians to receive support without Israeli interference. To them, this is not just about food and medicine, but about dignity, autonomy, and resistance to what they see as collective punishment. The international response has been mixed and cautious. Some governments have warned their citizens against joining the flotilla, while others have called for restraint and respect for humanitarian principles. The United Nations and human rights groups have voiced concerns over the potential for violence, urging all parties to avoid escalation. Yet behind the official statements lies a deeper tension: the struggle between state security claims and civilian-led activism. This tension is not unique to Gaza, but resonates in other conflict zones, where humanitarian efforts often collide with military restrictions. Media coverage has amplified the drama. Supporters broadcast updates from the ships, live, streaming their journey and turning the flotilla into a real-time spectacle of resistance. Israeli media highlight the security risks, portraying the flotilla as a propaganda stunt with potentially dangerous consequences. International outlets walk a fine line, balancing narratives of solidarity with warnings of impending conflict. The digital age ensures that any confrontation at sea will not only unfold in reality, but also in cyberspace, shaping global perceptions instantly and forcefully. The people on board the flotilla come from diverse backgrounds: activists, journalists, medical workers, politicians, and ordinary citizens. Their presence adds layers of symbolism, as each participant represents a slice of international solidarity. Some have sailed in past flotillas, bringing with them a sense of continuity in the struggle. Others are new faces, driven by the urgency of the present crisis in Gaza. Together, they form a moving coalition that challenges one of the most entrenched conflicts in the modern world, not through arms, but through presence, through insistence, through visibility. Critics argue that these flotillas play into Hamas's hands, offering political propaganda and delegitimizing Israel's security concerns. Supporters counter that labeling everything as security related ignores the humanitarian catastrophe that the blockade perpetuates. The tension between these two views is not just about Gaza. It is about how the world interprets resistance, humanitarianism, and sovereignty. Each side frames the narrative in a way that appeals to global sympathies, hoping to win not just the battle at sea, but the broader war of perception. As the flotilla approaches what many call the danger zone near Gaza, the risks increase dramatically. Maritime law is contested here, with Israel enforcing a naval blockade that it claims is legal under international law, while flotilla supporters argue that it is collective punishment and thus illegal. Any interception, therefore, is not only a physical act, but also a legal and political statement. Every maneuver, every command, every response carries weight beyond the moment. This is why governments, activists, and militaries alike watch these developments with such urgency. The symbolism of the flotilla cannot be overstated. Ships at sea evoke historical memories of blockades, sieges, and attempts to break chains of control. From wartime convoys to freedom sails, the act of defying a blockade has always carried enormous symbolic power. For Palestinians in Gaza, the knowledge that international ships are risking confrontation to reach them is itself a form of psychological support, a reminder that they are not forgotten. For Israel, stopping the flotilla is equally symbolic, reaffirming its control and security narrative in the face of global challenges. In this unfolding drama, every possible outcome carries consequences. If the flotilla is intercepted without violence, Israel may face criticism for obstructing humanitarian aid, but avoid the worst international fallout. If violence erupts, the global backlash could be severe, reigniting debates about the blockade, international law, and Israel's broader policies in Gaza. If, against the odds, the flotilla somehow reaches Gaza, it would be a major symbolic victory for activists and a direct challenge to Israel's authority. Each scenario feeds into a cycle of narratives, protests, and political fallout that extend far beyond the Mediterranean. What makes this moment especially tense is the regional context. Tensions are already rising across the Middle East, with conflicts, rivalries, and shifting alliances creating a volatile environment. Any incident at sea could spill over into broader diplomatic crises, involving regional powers, the United States and Europe. The flotilla may be small compared to the grand scale of regional geopolitics, but in such a charged environment, even a single clash can spark a chain of reactions that extend far beyond the waters of Gaza. For the activists on board, the risks are real and personal. They know the possibility of arrest, injury, or worse is very real. Yet their decision to sail reflects a conscious embrace of danger for the sake of principle. This willingness to risk confrontation is part of what gives the flotilla its symbolic power. It demonstrates that individuals are willing to put their bodies on the line against military might, highlighting the imbalance between armed enforcement and civilian protest. In this sense, the flotilla is not just a mission but a form of theater, a stage where global audiences watch the clash between defiance and enforcement. The coming days will be critical. As the Global Sumud Flotilla approaches Gaza's maritime boundaries, the world will be watching closely. Will Israel intercept the ships? And if so, how? Will the activists resist? Or will they allow themselves to be boarded peacefully? Will the confrontation spiral into violence, or will cooler heads prevail? These questions remain unanswered, but the stage is set for a dramatic and potentially explosive encounter. Ultimately, the flotilla represents something larger than itself. It embodies the enduring struggle over Gaza, over international law, over the balance between security and humanity. It forces the world to look once again at a place that is often spoken of in statistics but rarely seen in human terms. It challenges governments, media, and individuals to take a stand, whether in support, in opposition, or in indifference. In this way, the Global Sumud Flotilla is not just approaching Gaza, it is approaching the conscience of the world. As events unfold, one thing is certain: the impact of this flotilla will be felt far beyond the waters it sails. Whether in confrontation or in symbolic victory, it will add another chapter to the long, complex, and painful story of Gaza. It will provoke debate, inspire solidarity, and raise questions that go to the heart of international politics. And as the ships draw nearer, the danger zone is not only geographical but moral, testing the values and choices of nations, activists, and citizens around the globe.